everybody. We're here in another episode of the speaker preview series for the Continuous Brokerage Summit, this coming September 24th and 25th. We're here with Brendan Quinn. Welcome, Brendan, to the podcast. How are things going in LA today?
Thank you for having me. There's a fire just a few miles east of me right now, but otherwise things are going pretty well.
I hope it's not a fire started by some, World Cup fans while they were doing a barbecue outside the Fan Fest or something.
Oh, it's a pretty industrial area, so
Oh, okay.
I think it's just an accident, but yeah, life in LA.
Really? Well, just to give you a brief background as to who Brendan is going to be one of our key speakers at the summit. That he's a data architect for a company called Fullstack GTM. We're going to get in briefly about what Fullstack GTM does. But this is a very critical part of the whole AI automation process, right? So, as you owner, manager, director, CEO of a insurance brokerage, look to automate your firm, turn your firm into a continuous brokerage with AI, you got to set a solid data foundation, right? Because, there's a saying that's going around, tech people know this, and now it's kind of getting mainstream is data in, data out. So you got dirty data in, dirty data out, bad data in, bad data out, good data in, good data out. Part of that is setting up the proper data architecture. So Brendan, before we get into, what you're going to talk about in the summit, tell us a little bit about what Fullstack GTM does. That's where you currently work.
Yeah, we help companies organize their data, get insights from their data, all that. More recently, of course, we've been helping companies figure out how to use AI to better access their data and do all that. So as an example of the sort of thing that we'll do, the companies we work with have data that exists in different places. You might have your sales data in a CRM or something like that. You would like to combine it with your financial data or your product usage data or something like that, but they all live in separate places. So we bring it together, we clean the data and set up exactly how metrics should be interpreted and things like that. Sometimes we'll do dashboarding so that people can have reporting and all that. And more recently, we've helped clients get set up with AI in different use cases. Maybe it's just using something like Claude directly, or maybe it's a tool like Hex that's a little bit more user-friendly in certain ways. So that's pretty much the gamut of what we do.
That's actually really relevant to, Alex Paras, who is the CEO of Lakeside Consulting Group. His company is the one that's organizing the summit, and I'm helping him out with that. He's writing a book called The Continuous Brokerage, and one of the things that he talks about, there's a key story that he talks about from one of the insurance brokerages that he worked for previously, in that if one of those brokerages could find a really good data guy who knows all the quirks and the idiosyncrasies of their single source of truth, their platform about all their insurance policies, their clients, etc., you keep them, you treat them like a Savile Row tailor, right? So that's great if you can find that person, but that's kind of a single throat to choke, and it's the single point of failure. And I think what you're going to talk about, what you specialize in doing, is a sort of like an antidote to that, so that everything is very organized and integrated. I don't know if I said that accurately or not.
Yeah, it definitely still helps to have someone who has general familiarity with how the data works. We've often found that one of our most helpful partners at companies tends to be that person who could easily become an analyst if they wanted, has the kind of understanding of how data generally works and all that, but spends a lot of their time with a lot of the non-technical stakeholders and whatnot. But yeah, in the absence of having that kind of person full time, organizations like us and Alex's organize the data in such a way that if we get it right the first time, then 90% of the time you can probably get the answers on your own.
Perfect. So, and I think that's a good segue to the topic of your talk. Give us maybe not a very brief overview, but kind of a brief overview, as want to make sure that it's thorough enough so that people kind of grasp on it. What is it? What are you going to talk about at the summit? And why is it relevant to insurance brokerages who want to start implementing AI as a core functionality within
Yeah.
their business?
Yeah. So a lot of businesses basically manage the business and data through spreadsheets and things like that. You can totally do that. Spreadsheets, even in the most technically sophisticated companies, spreadsheets are happening somewhere, whether the analytics team likes spreadsheets you can't connect to each other super easily. You have to do these crazy formulas. I've seen some things that people have been able to do that blew my mind. And I thought, oh, wow, how did you figure out how to do that? We can set things up that flow in a much easier way. So that first step is getting all those data sources, your sales, CRM, your finance data, product data, whatever, putting it in one space so that you can clean up not only each individual source's data, but combine them if you want. And then there are a few other layers. And I'll also talk about how this relates to the AI piece of it all.
Yes.
Yeah. So the combined software is usually called a data warehouse, often something like Snowflake or Databricks or BigQuery. And then from there, oftentimes you'll go to your business intelligence tool. That'll be something that has much nicer looking dashboards and things like that.
Like a Power
If you're, oh yeah, what was it?
like a Power BI or something like that?
Yeah, like a Power BI, Tableau, Looker, any of those. Um, Oftentimes in between, you'll also have what is called a semantic layer. The thing to understand about that is that's where you'll define how certain metrics are calculated, so you only have to do it once. So, for example, your gross revenue retention metric, you can say, these are the fields. This one dealt with this way, this one dealt with this way, divide the two or whatever. And always make it a percentage or something like that. You can do all this stuff. So you can just say, show me GRR in the BI tool, and it'll give you the percentage. It'll be formatted nicely, and it'll be calculated in a way that you don't have to think about. So those are the kinds of things we've been doing generally so far. This helps feed into what AI can do with your data, because the more of that sort of pre-processing you do, the easier time the AI will have. I've seen this where if you ask your AI agent or whatever to do something without much context, sometimes it'll spit out garbage. Fernando said bad data in, bad data out. But if you've done a lot of cleaning, if you can provide it certain guidance, like this is the pre-calculation you'll use for this sort of thing, you don't have to actively say that. You might put it in code somewhere. Then the AI tool has an easier time and will be more likely to give you something that is accurate and closer to what you want.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think it's very important for insurance brokers just to understand this. Okay.
Yeah.
So Brendan, I was wondering if you could give me like a concrete example of a company where, where you had to set this up for them, maybe a company that really wasn't, very savvy when it came to managing their data.
Yeah.
I know a lot of companies out there, especially, people who are probably going to be attending the summit,
Yeah.
are a little, are a little more focused on the client acquisition part, but not so much on the tech part, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Of course. There was one client that was managing their data largely through a tool that required a lot of very manual work. The analyst who was putting the data together had to impose a lot of very manual rules of if this, then that, if this, then that, in a way that was not easy for other people to see and not even easy for her to go back and to check on. We helped set up a new data warehouse for them. We put them on Snowflake in this case. And I wrote a lot of SQL, which is the code you'll usually use you'll use a lot of the time in a data context, to produce a lot of cleanup that was very easily viewable by everybody, easily editable by the analyst anytime she wanted to change things, and cleaner with putting the rules together. And we were able to match pretty much everything that she had been doing before. And then we had been able to set up, at the time, this was a couple years ago, the BI tool, Tableau at the time, to make sure data got in. They could make whatever dashboards they wanted. They didn't have to think too hard about calculating the metrics themselves. They had the metrics basically pre-calculated, so they could say, do this conversion rate by this point, this time aggregation or whatever. And more recently, we got them set up on this tool called Hex, which was and just another BI tool for a long time, but we found it has a really good AI integration. They use one of the better models that performs better. And it has made accessing data a lot easier for them because they can do things like ask a question just in normal everyday English and then get an answer from it.
Yeah, and I think that's so, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's so important, especially with insurance is such a data heavy
Yeah.
business, right? Especially if you're really trying to assess risks, opportunities. Like a lot of insurance brokers, when they're in the PNC space, their property and casualty space, they have to find out if their clients have the coverage, enough coverage to their place of business, their buildings, their assets, et cetera, that are kind of the norm in their area, right? And sometimes it's kind of difficult to find that, right? So, if you have the proper data structure set up, and instead of doing it manually, instead of like spending just hours and hours trying to find out, I think what you're describing can really help. These brokerages really cut down the time doing that by connecting putting in place a proper data warehouse, connecting a reporting tool or a business intelligence tool that has these AI integrations so that people can then just kind of like with plain language ask them to do things, right? Instead of people having to know how to write Python or SQL or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing. If you've set it up well, you don't have to repeat the processes. The rules of the underlying data architecture are the same if you add more data in. As long as it's through one of the existing flows, a lot of the calculations and cleanup can happen automatically so that you don't have to keep doing it each time.
Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah. So something I had a real curiosity about, most insurance brokers, have kind of like, there might be a skeleton crew IT team. And if they know about technology or databases or something, they might know about Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server, et cetera. But, you brought up some really interesting names like Snowflake, data lake infrastructure or data lakes infrastructure. I don't know if I said that the right way, but why are these relevant to insurance brokerages right now? These kind of
Yeah.
new next generation of data tools.
I think these are some of the a lot easier to work with. Granted, I've never tried some of the other ones that you mentioned, like Oracle and
Yeah.
Microsoft. The engineer who works with us might have. But I will say for myself, Snowflake and Databricks have been generally pretty accessible. They were developed more recently, so there's a little bit more of an eye towards the use cases that have developed recently with, again, general business intelligence, but also being able to feed things into AI.
Hmm. Okay. 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 Very cool. Very cool. Is there anything else that you think that, like any trends that you're seeing with regards to data architecture for companies that maybe I haven't even asked you about?
Ooh, that's a good question. One thing I will say is you're never going to get to 100%. Um, and as long as you have an appropriate expectation of getting towards better, getting towards more efficient in general, this is the reason, even at the most sophisticated companies, there's still going to be Excel spreadsheets somewhere because the data architecture won't solve every case for everybody. So somebody's still going to download a data set and do their thing. But you can set things up such that, again, you can handle maybe 80 to 90% of cases in a cleaner, more automated way. And again, if you're careful about it, if you set it up well, then you have less human error of people repeating processes over and over. you might still get errors. That's just an inevitable part of this, but it can happen more efficiently and much cleaner.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for spending this time, letting us get to know who you are and about sort of like the new things that are coming down the pike with regards to AI and the importance. I think this is really important to kind of, for people to understand the importance of having a data architecture, a solid data architecture as sort of like the foundation before you implement AI, because, I think one of the big things that are kind of, the big negatives that you're hearing about AI projects or AI pilot projects, right? There's tons of AI pilot projects happening, but for some reason they never seem to turn into real projects, right? And I think a lot of that is because they're kind of like, their eyes get, they get deer in the headlights thing with
Yeah.
AI, and they say, "Yeah, let's put AI," but they don't think through how they're going to get it set up and what is the specific use case they're going to use it for.
Yeah, I think that's right. The kinds of use cases we're talking about in this conversation, at least, are relatively safe and straightforward in the way that we're not treating AI like magic. We're talking about the processes you set up in place where AI can be very helpful. That it clearly has a lot of potential, and somebody's going to figure out some good stuff with it. But we're talking about the slightly less risky stuff here, the stuff that's been a little bit more explored. One thing I can say to help mitigate issues that you may come across is to do a lot of human checking, to be honest. We have one client we've been helping with their agent setup for data, and before fully launching it as an official thing, they've solicited a lot of feedback on, hey, is this telling you accurate information? Is this understanding what you're asking it? Is there any context you think maybe if the agent knew, then it might have been able to answer your question better? And I think figuring that out for yourself and figuring out the extent to which you can trust the AI work and how you can make it so that it's much more helpful than not is very important.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Brendan. And, your talk, we don't have the specific time slot set up for your talk, but
All good.
going to be either the 24th or the 25th of September at continuousbrokerage.live, continuousbrokerage.live. And great. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Fernando.
Yeah, absolutely.